Welcome to Robot Unicorn, hosted by my parents, Jess and Scott. I hope you enjoyed the episode.
Hello again. I am so excited to have you back for another episode. Today, we are talking about something that I am just super excited about. It's something that we haven't talked about, I don't think, on this podcast yet, and we've covered so many topics, so that's really exciting. And today we're going to be talking about panic-free potty training. And there's a really good reason why I say panic-free, because potty training is something that stresses parents out. At least it really stressed me out with our oldest child. And it stresses people out for a lot of reasons. And so today I wanted to talk about why potty training can feel just so stressful for parents, some of the common kind of things that do stress parents out. And then I want to talk about a different approach to potty training, one that doesn't feel super stressful. And I'll give you some tangible things that you can really look at to see if your child's ready to be potty trained and if they're not, or if it's time to take a break. And I'm going to give you like a new approach, a new way to look at potty training that I haven't really seen out there. And I'm going to tell you why that's so important to me. So this is like a really good episode for a couple of different parents. So I'm just thinking, so this is a great episode for you if you have started potty training and you're like, this is not going so great and I don't really know what to do because now I'm just like caught up in this really terrible and gross cycle. This is a great episode for you if you have not started potty training yet and you want to, but you're not sure if it's the right time or how to even get started. And this is also going to be maybe a healing episode for you if you did go through potty training with your child and it didn't feel like it went well. And it felt super frustrating. And it felt like, am I failing? Like, why does this method work for 90% of children or whatever it is, but it's not working for me and my child? Is that a failure of mine? And also, if you just want to learn about potty training and you want to get more information, this is great for you too. So thank you for being here. Let's dive in. The very first thing that I want to talk about is maybe a little bit controversial, which is the problem with traditional approaches. Now, my team and I have looked into all the different approaches that are really out there for potty training, but I would say that the most common method that we see in books and courses and all over is the 3-day method. Okay, so the 3-day method is really like, we are going to focus on potty training for 3 days. We're going to focus on getting our child to sit on the potty, to go pee and poop. We're going to give them lots of fluids. They might be pants free around the house. And hopefully by the end of 3 days, they're good to go and they are potty trained. Now, for some children, easy temperament children, that works great. For a lot of children that are highly sensitive, potentially neurodivergent, maybe slow to warm, this method can really backfire. And what I see out there, I think really frustrates me because people love to pull a statistic out of nowhere to say, yeah, this works for 99% of kids, which we saw when we were looking into marketing of this 3-day method, or, this works for X amount of children, or it's supported all of these kids. And so when we see that, it does create a panic in us because we think to ourselves, if 99% of kids can go to the potty in 3 days, what's wrong with me and my child that I followed this program to a T and it didn't work? And as a therapist, I have heard that story countless times. And so I'm here to tell you that 3-day method does not work for every child. And just like everything, I wish Scott was here because I'm sure he'd have some more frank language even for that. But it works for some kids for sure. Some kids who are really mild-tempered don't even really need a full potty training approach, right? We just kind of present them with the opportunity and there they go. They get started and they can pretty much train themselves. I've had a child like that where I barely had to do anything and all of a sudden there she was going pee and poop on the potty, no problem. But that's not going to work for everybody. Okay, so here's a few reasons why. First, and like why do I have to say this, is all children are unique. There's never going to be a one-size-fits-all approach that works for every kid. The only one-size-fits-all thing is that every kid needs a good relationship with their parents. But other than that, every child's unique. And so what's going to work for them is actually going to be based on that individual child and what they need and how they best learn a new skill. Another reason it doesn't work is that a lot of sensitive kids, neurodivergent kids, they feel if they are being coerced in any way. They feel if a parent is trying to force something on them before they're ready. And often that will lead to a lot of pushback. They don't like that feeling. It's very overwhelming for them. It feels really disconcerting. So they might push back because they can feel that they're being forced to do something before they're ready. And I honestly think my kids would roll their eyes at me for this, but I think there's some wisdom there, right? I'm okay with a child pushing back to say, look, I'm not ready for this yet. And the real challenge with these 3-day methods is that it can actually become pretty traumatizing for the parents too, because the child might not be ready and the child's showing them that by kind of pushing back and saying, I don't want to go on the potty. But the parent's like, well, I decided to do it right now. I decided to do it this weekend and you got to do it. And so then it becomes a battle of the relationship becoming ruptured, where the parent's like forcing the child to sit on the potty and the child doesn't want to be on there. And the parent feels like, well, do I have to pin them down? Like, how do I keep them on there? And a lot of these approaches too have other things that are really not relational, like things like saying that poop is yucky and gross and stinky and telling the child, like, you don't want to be yucky. But if you think about, and please go back and listen to the episodes we did on sensitive kids. If we think about what we know about sensitive kids, if we're saying your poop smells yucky and you're yucky and that's yucky and whatever, what they're hearing is I'm yucky. And then that really can trigger that like sensitivity. And now they're pushing back even more because that doesn't feel good for them. And it's putting their defenses up, and then there's shame involved. And like, there's a lot of emotion that can be involved with potty training. And when a parent feels that, like that panic, like, oh, I really need to do it this weekend. Like, we've set aside the whole weekend for you to be naked and on this potty, but you're not doing it. So now I feel like I have to force you. It can just cause a rupture for everybody. And so if that was you and that was your situation, and I know a lot of parents feel immense shame around it, first off, it's not your fault. People are selling you this, basically saying this is what you have to do to get your child to use the potty. So it's not your fault if it didn't work. And please have some compassion on yourself. And know that so sometimes what happens is that those 3 days go super poorly for parents and for kids. And now we have more power struggles, and the child starts holding their pee because now they don't know like what kind of reaction the parent's going to have if they pee their pants or whatever happens. We can really get into a battle. And so I've actually given the suggestion to quite a few parents who are like really in the thick of a potty training battle, and it's just not going well at all, to say, do you know that it's okay to take a break? And they'd be like, what? Well, we've been trying for 6 months and like they still won't go. But when we get curious about it, they've been trying for 6 months and it's been going terribly. And they're getting so mad and angry at their child for like pooping on the floor or in their diaper or their underwear. And it's gross, and I totally get it. And I've totally been there, but it's just not going well. And so I actually go, well, we're not really getting anywhere, and continuing to force it probably is going to continue to not get us anywhere. What I would suggest would be to take a break, let them use diapers again for a little bit. You let them know we're going to just take a little break from this. Give your family just a deep breath, like a reset. Spend that time that you're not now focusing on potty training, nurturing the relationship with your child, just, okay, reconnecting. And then in a little bit, if the child doesn't decide, oh, I want to try it out on my own, which often does happen, then you try it again. And this time you try it from more of like a nurtured place, less forcing, less rushing. And we often see that when we take that pressure off, all of a sudden the kids are doing a lot better with the potty training. So again, we really have to look at temperament. I don't think that those 3-day methods really take into consideration the temperament and the vulnerability that comes with potty training, especially when you're like naked for that amount of time. And also a lot of parents simply just don't have 3 dedicated days that they can spend being home with their child naked and trying to clean up pee. So that's also okay. You can totally teach your child how to use the potty without having to be home for 3 full days with them. But it might take more time. And I actually think that like any skill we learn, skills take time to learn, to develop. So expecting a child who every other skill that they've learned has taken time, they've had to practice, they've had to make lots of mistakes. Like you think about walking, like a child just doesn't get up and walk in 3 days. It takes a lot of time. It takes first holding onto the table and then, taking that 1 step on their own and then falling. And then a week later they try it again and they take 2 steps and then they fall. Then all of a sudden it starts getting easier and they can take 3 steps and then they fall and then 4 and then 5 and then eventually they're walking, and it's like pretty rare that they fall, but occasionally they do. And I like to take a very similar approach to potty training. Instead of it being this thing that we have to teach this child this skill, this complex skill that involves a lot of like mind-body connection in a very short amount of time, like some kids will still pick it up in this method in a couple of days, and that's fine. But I like to think of it as a skill. Like we are teaching our child how to use the potty. and a reframe that a lot of other people who kind of come from that similar background as I do, the developmentalist perspective, they like to call it potty learning, because really we're learning a new skill, which is how to use the potty or how to go pee or poop on the toilet. So when we think of it from that perspective, just like anything your child's learning how to do, talking, walking, using a fork, whatever it is, children learn a lot of skills. It takes time. It takes making mistakes. It takes practice, and it takes them being ready to learn that skill. So that is kind of my spiel on why for a lot of families I see and I support and I hear from, the 3-day method isn't working, why parents feel like they're failing, and the idea that instead of seeing it as training, like the skill that we have to train our child to do in 3 days, we can see it as learning, as a process, just like they've learned so many other things. Hey friends, so at pickup last week, our daughter asked Scott a truly kind of tricky question in front of her younger siblings. Scott was telling me that when he heard a question like this, he used to panic, but this time he had a plan. And he said to our daughter, "Thank you for asking. Let's talk tonight when we've got privacy." And that's a line that he learned straight from our new body safety and consent course at Nurtured First. So this new body safety and consent course is taught by me. So Jess, if you listen to this podcast, you know me. I'm a child therapist and a mom of 3, and I have taught body safety and consent education for years. This course takes all my years of experience teaching this education and gives you calm, age-appropriate language for body parts, consent, and boundaries. You'll learn how to teach your kids that no means no. You'll learn how to teach them to read facial cues. You'll talk about safe and unsafe touch, and you'll even teach them about their uh-oh feeling. There's guidance inside this course for the real life stuff, like tickling that goes too far, and even the difference between a secret and a surprise. We made this course at Nurtured First because research shows that body safety education helps kids speak up sooner, and we want that for our family, for Scott and I, but also for you. So check the course out at nurturedfirst.com/bodysafety, and to save 10%, use the code ROBOTUNICORN. And just full disclosure here, we are the creators of this course, and we're so proud of it. So I'm going to give you a few different things that you can look at if you want to try a different approach. So the first thing that I'd be looking at to say, is a child ready even, right? Sometimes I think the other problem is we're like starting it so early that we're starting this like power struggle dynamic battle, like really, really early on, like 18 months. And maybe they're actually not quite ready yet to learn. And if we just had waited a little bit longer, then all of a sudden it would have been easier because developmentally they'd be a little more ready to learn how to use the potty. So I'm kind of the mindset, and I know not everyone agrees with me, even in the potty learning space, of we really want to look at readiness and make sure they have at least a few signs of this versus just like parental readiness, like I'm sick of diapers and I'm ready for them to be out of it. Okay, so a few signs of readiness that I might look at would be physical readiness. So can they be dry for like 2 hours or so? Are their bowel movements somewhat predictable? Can they walk and sit, right? Even like the physical readiness of like, do they know how to pull up and down their pants? When I'm teaching people how to help their kids use the potty, it's like sometimes the kids are so little that they haven't even learned yet how to put their pants on by themselves, right? So that to me would be a skill that I'd want to focus on before I get my child to sit on the potty and start using the potty. I'd also be looking at some cognitive readiness. So what I mean by cognitive readiness is, can your child follow like a 1 to 2 step instruction? So that can they do something like, hey, can you go to the bathroom and sit on the toilet? If you tell them 2 things, can they understand that? Can they do that? And can they communicate needs with you? So will your child already now, even when they're in a diaper, will they be able to say to you something like, I have to go pee, or I peed? And then that kind of goes to like another one of these things, like readiness signs. Are they uncomfortable with the pee and poop in their diaper? Now, I would not base teaching your child to use the potty or not based on if they're uncomfortable with their pee and poop, because based on your child's sensory needs, some kids are just never going to be bothered by that. And so you can't base getting started just on that factor alone. But if your child is bothered by it, that's a great time to get started too. Often kids will start to become bothered and they don't want to have peed in their diaper and they don't want to have pooped in their diaper and they don't like how it smells and feels. That's a great start to using the potty. But some kids, I've seen that, and their sensory profile plays a big impact. Some kids just never end up feeling uncomfortable. And so we have to get started on the potty learning process sometimes, even if the child's still like unfazed by pooping in their diaper. Another sign of readiness is that your child shows some interest. So they like to watch you go pee on the potty. They have questions about it. They want to practice flushing the toilet. There's like this desire for independence that's starting to come out. And then the parental and family readiness. So do you, as the parent, have the emotional energy to do this? Because, I mean, we're so silly sometimes as parents. I mean, I know I am. Like I was, 37 weeks pregnant or something, exhausted, tired. Definitely not the time to be like, let's learn how to use the potty. But for some reason, I was like, I don't want to have 2 kids in diapers, so let's do it now. And I started the potty training process. Like when my child was not showing any signs of readiness, I was not emotionally ready because I was so pregnant, I could barely bend over. But for some reason, I had it in my head that I had to do it at that exact time. And then of course it backfired on me. So really asking yourself, like, do I have to rush this right now? Or would this actually be better like maybe in a month once the baby's here? You know, those kind of questions. Or do I really have to teach my child how to use the potty 1 week before we move to a new house? Or maybe it can wait and we can do this in the new house, right? Like sometimes for whatever reason, we get it in our heads that we have to do it right now when that's not actually the case. So those are some of the signs of like readiness that I would be exploring and looking into. Now, the next thing that I kind of want to leave you with too is like, who is your child and how do they learn? So when my team was pulling together a bunch of information about potty learning and research, what we really looked at was these 3 different profiles, like sensory profiles, and how they each need a different approach for learning how to use the potty. So we have our adaptable, kind of flexible kids. And Scott and I have talked about these kids before on the podcast. So they go with the flow, they thrive on routine, and they are often the easiest to potty train. So sometimes these kids, like I told you, I have one child like this, will just kind of potty train themselves. Like they'll just one day maybe be like, hey, I kind of feel like wearing underwear. And you'll put them in. They might pee their pants a few times, but they're really motivated to sit on the potty. And the whole process doesn't really feel traumatic or difficult. Like you just keep presenting them with the opportunity. They keep going on and great. Now they know how to use the potty and you think you're a master potty trainer, right? And a lot of the kids who do well with a 3-day approach, or they can learn it in 3 days, they're kind of that temperament, a more flexible, easy to please temperament. Then we have our slow to warm or more like sensitive kids. These kids are observers, so they need to watch and understand. They need to have a little more time to process the information before they jump in. And they also can be really sensitive to even like the sounds. Like we forget that potty training is like a real sensory experience. There's the smell, there's the sound of the flush, which for sensitive kids can be really loud and kind of scary. There's the sound of like the plop, not to be too graphic, into the toilet. There's a lot of sounds and just sensory stimulation. There's like the pressure of like your parent hovering over you, like, did you do it? Sometimes for these sensitive kids, even I've seen with kids where the parent's big like celebration reaction, right? Like they pooped on the potty for the first time. And the parent's like, yeah, you did it. That's amazing. Here's a sticker. That was too loud. I've had kids tell me like, it's too loud. It was too loud for their sensitive ears. And actually now it's too much pressure because now they're like, well, if I don't poop on the potty, then they're going to be disappointed in me. And then it becomes this internal pressure and like all these emotions going on for our little complex, sensitive toddlers and preschoolers, which end up making it more difficult for them, right? So they're going to need a different approach that probably has not as intense praise, is quieter. They're going to need more time to observe before they get started. They're going to need lots of opportunities to use the potty on their own time before we ever push it. They're going to need us to tell them the story of how they sat on the potty and how did that feel. They might need a little more time, like just being around a toilet and flushing it and seeing what happens when things go down. I've had sensitive kids before that are like sad to like flush the toilet. And so they're going to need to hear a story about what happens when I flush the toilet. Where do things go? So these kids are just going to need an approach that's more tailored for a sensitive child. That's going to help them feel safe and want to use the potty. And then we have our strong-willed kids. And I would say that a lot of the times these kids might also be sensitive, might also be neurodivergent. I know that neurodivergent kids often do struggle with potty training. It takes a little bit longer. And that's due to many reasons, but sometimes it's that executive functioning where like all of those things like the impulse control, the reasoning, the sensory, they can kind of like all mesh together to make it more difficult for them to use the potty. But for the sake of right now, I'm going to talk about strong-willed. Just these kids might be like, I'm going to do it myself. They have a need for autonomy. They don't like being told what to do. Like, don't tell me to sit on this toilet. If you tell me, I'm for sure not going to do it. They will act like they have to be the boss of learning how to use the potty. And so again, a 3-day method where we're forcing them to be naked and sit out on a potty a lot of times, that's probably going to backfire for them. Because they're going to not feel a sense of control. They're going to feel like they're being pushed, which they're not going to like. And the more they feel pushed, the more they're going to push back. So these kids probably are going to do better on choice. They're going to really need to see the parent as like a confident leader that they can trust. They're going to need time to sit on that potty on their own time when they feel like it. And they're going to need it to feel like that was their choice. They're going to need some playfulness from their parent because these strong-willed kids are probably going to evoke the most like frustration and anger from their parents. Believe me, I also have one of those children and I know how frustrating potty training can feel. So you can probably see, and I hope that this brings some healing to your heart or at least some reduction of the panic that some kids, sure, they can do a 3-day method really easy. And other kids, they're going to need a more tailored approach to their temperament. And so if that approach, that one-size-fits-all approach that you've been using isn't working, it's not you, it's the approach. So I hope this is like a good starter for you just to look at, okay, who's my child? Maybe I can take some things I know about strong-willed kids or sensitive kids or about their readiness, or maybe I need a little break before I can get more into potty learning. Now, of course, like there's just so much more I could talk about, but since this is our intro episode to learning how to use the potty, I wanted to just talk a lot about the approach today and why the traditional approaches just might not work as well for you and helping you understand that your child's temperament is going to impact the approach and helping you see as well that possibly we need to reframe the way we look at teaching potty instead of training as a skill. You know, like I was mentioning, the same way we talk about learning how to walk, learning how to talk, it takes time, opportunity, and giving your child lots of chances to see you use the potty, to try and use it themselves before you really make it something structured. If you want more on this and you're like, Jess, okay, you just barely grazed the surface. I want you to do more episodes. Let us know. We would love to do more episodes on this topic. I really do love the topic of potty training. I think it's something that's not talked about enough, and I'm really excited to be talking about it more on Nurture First as well. I also want to tell you that, and I don't have like any script for this or anything, but we have been working really hard behind the scenes to make a new potty training course for you. This is like so highly requested. It's been highly requested for years and years, and I'm sorry it's taken us so long, but because there's nothing really that we could find out there that's quite like our approach, it took us a really long time to create this because we're basically creating a new way of potty training that is this learning approach, but it's still structured. So for the parents like myself, and I'm sure like so many of you who do need a structure to it, that doesn't make you feel anxious and that gives you lots of time to practice. And then when your child's ready, you'll get to know the signs of readiness. Then we teach you exactly like these 5 goals that you kind of have to meet to help your child independently use the potty. So if that's something that's interesting to you, we'll put a link to our brand new course, which is just panic-free potty training, in the show notes as well. You can check it out. We'll have a little discount code for you there as well. But I really hope that this helped and that you feel less panicked about potty training after listening to this today. All right, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you again next week. Hey friends, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. We are glad that you are here. If you enjoyed today's episode and found it interesting, we'd really appreciate it if you'd leave a rating and a review. Scott and I actually sit down together and read them all. A 5-star rating helps us share our podcast and get these important messages out there. Thank you so much for listening, and we can't wait to talk to you again next time.